Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the early short films of John Waters. And those short films are Hag in a Black Leather Jacket, Roman Candles, and Eat Your Makeup. Recently I had the chance to see these three short films, which had been completely unavailable, or at least through most of my life of being a John Waters fan. I'm from Baltimore, I grew up in Baltimore, and John Waters is a big deal there. And I've been through his filmography a lot of times. I've seen close to almost everything, but I had always heard and seen these shorts listed on IMDb and on Wikipedia, and I'd always go, oh, well, one day, but I'll probably never see them. And then when the Film Society of Lincoln Center decided to show them as part of their John Waters retrospective, which was actually a complete retrospective, they were playing everything, even Mondo Trasho and Multiple Maniacs. But these three hadn't really been screened pretty much the entire time I've been a fan of John Waters. So it was a big deal for me, and I thought since I saw these and it was a rare opportunity. As I said, I am born and raised in Baltimore. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York, but John Waters is a much bigger deal to filmmaking in Baltimore, and it's a different experience than it is in New York. When you're 13 or 14 and you dream about making movies or being involved in movies, he's a name you pretty much go to, and he was a name I always went to. And it was cool to hear about someone making these cool, gross, shocking, short films before there was anything like that in the basement of churches in Baltimore, basements of churches that I would go to for, youth mixers or whatever, and I would hear about how in the basement they played Multiple Maniacs or Mondo Trasho or Eat Your Makeup. My dad would tell me stories about that. Although I still haven't seen Mondo Trasho and Multiple Maniacs at this time, taking the advantage of seeing these three was something I had to do, and I always heard about being able to see these films in a church basement, and it was kind of this really small underground thing before John Waters blew up and became the major cult director he did. And this is really the early days. I've never really looked at a filmmaker's student work, because this really kind of is. He was a high school student when he made the first film, and the other two were after he had dropped out of college. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to review each film individually in a row in order, and that's how I'll do it. Hag in a Black Leather Jacket was made in 1964. It's the first John Waters film ever made. It is a 17-minute film, and it was made for $30. It's about a black man and a white woman who were married by a Ku Klux Klan member on a rooftop, which was actually John Waters' parents' rooftop. And then they kind of drive around and dance, and the black guy gets in a trash can at a certain point, and there's a lot of shots that don't make any sense really. And you can tell Waters was influenced more by underground films, by art house films at the time. I don't know how many of those he had really seen at that point. And he's often talked about how he read more about them than saw them. But he does a pretty good approximation of it. It's definitely his roughest film, Hag in a Black Leather Jacket. The soundtrack has cuts in and out of pop songs. You'll hear a segment of one pop song and then it cuts right to a different one. And it's so rough, but you get the semblance of kind of a Waters film. It feels like the beginning of John Waters' style. The idea of, at 1964, a white woman marrying a black man and the wedding officiant being a man in a Ku Klux Klan outfit was pretty shocking, and he based it kind of on that imagery. He considered it a no-budget film because they didn't spend very much, and they actually played it at a Baltimore coffee house and made the $30 back. I've heard from various people that this played in the basement of churches. The guy at the Film Society of Lincoln Center said they all had done that. I've heard other places from him it played once at a coffee house. Who knows who's right about either. It is really rough, and John Waters has said that this is best kept in his closet. It really hadn't been shown probably since maybe the 60s or 70s until he actually played these shorts during some of his photo exhibits recently. It's just kind of interesting to see where that style came from and that he was still John Waters. Even at that point, this is a nitpicky thing, but Mary Vivian Pierce is in this film and Mink Stole is not, and those are the two people who are supposed to have been in every John Waters film ever made. I kind of thought I saw her in this, but she's not credited on anything I can find. So if that is true that she had nothing to do with this would mean Mary Vivian Pierce was technically in one more than Mink Stole. So the other thing that's interesting is Mona Montgomery, who actually stole the film stock that this film was shot on. She also did that for Roman Candles, and she's only in these three shorts by John Waters. She doesn't go on to be in anything else. I'll get to someone else like that later. But Mona Montgomery was actually John Waters' then girlfriend, believe it or not. He's written about it apparently. I kind of remember pieces of it, But it's interesting that a gay icon did once have a girlfriend, and she was in all three of these shorts. She was an integral part of John Waters' filmmaking career because she's the one who stole the film stock that he would get to shoot on, which would let him go on to become the director he was. I understand the temptation to see it because it's so rare and so rarely shown. It's probably his worst film, but it's also his first film, and he was just learning, and he hadn't gone to film school yet, so it's kind of excusable. Hag in a Black Leather Jacket was 1964. Roman Candles, which is made in 1966, is made after John Waters left NYU. He was caught smoking weed on campus, and they kicked him out of his dorm, and then he left NYU and went back to Baltimore. This film is the most different from the style that John Waters would cultivate through his filmography. 3 projectors projecting 3 different, basically it's like watching 3 films at once synced to a tape recorder. How it was shown to me, at least, like a 4x3. It's basically cut into 4 squares, and 3 of those squares, except for the square that would be right here, has film going in it. And so you're basically watching 3 different movies at once, but then this image right here is black, which is strange. I keep looking over at it going like, is something gonna happen? Is there gonna be something? But spoiler alert, there isn't. It's the hardest John Waters film to watch. A few people left the screening I was at. It was a really hard film to sit through. It's 40 minutes of watching 3 movies at the exact same time in small little squares. And you're never sure what to watch. Sometimes footage from other movies pops up in the squares. The Creature Walks Among Us, one of the Creature from the Black Lagoon sequels, comes up in it. Others I couldn't exactly identify. It confused a lot of people. Pop songs are playing while this is going on. Some people could get into the pop songs, but I noticed like after a while they just couldn't take it. This is Divine's first appearance in a John Waters film. Most of the Dreamlanders who you would later see in his feature films are in this in small parts. In all 3 of the squares you see this guy reading a book, smoking a pipe, which that was probably the most bizarre thing. I don't even know if I saw all of it. I sat through the whole thing. I looked at the screen the whole time, but there's probably some things I missed. It was weird to watch as an audience watching 3 films at once because someone would laugh in the back row and someone would laugh in the 3rd row. Are they laughing at the thing I'm watching, or is that the second one? It was very confusing. It's probably his least accessible film just because it's so hard to watch, really. I know he tried to do it like Andy Warhol's style, who he's really influenced by at the time, but it doesn't represent his style, really. It kind of does because you see like Divine and some of the little parts look like things he would make, but he never made anything like this again. I think that's probably for the best because it was a bit hard to get through. I don't really understand why it was called Roman Candles. I guess it's like his most experimental film he ever made, but there is a little pieces of Divine in it, so it's kind of like the debut of Divine. So for that, I think it's worth a watch. I actually was thinking if this was on at a party in the background and you could just run it in a loop, I think it would be cool for that. I know he doesn't release it commercially because of the rights issues with the music, but honestly he could take out the music and just have it play at a gallery or something, and I think it would probably work. It's very much kind of an art movie. I guess he's probably not into that, or maybe no one's proposed that idea. It's weirder to watch in a theatrical setting, but I think if you were casually walking by it, it would probably be a lot better. Maybe I'm insulting the film that way, but I think it would probably be best that way. The next film from 1968 is Eat Your Makeup. Now, Eat Your Makeup is probably the closest to what you'd expect from a John Waters short. It's the most accessible of the 3, not that it's that accessible. He's still not working with sync sound at this point. It feels like a John Waters short if you are used to Desperate Living and Pink Flamingos, and you'd probably be a lot more into it. It's a lot more fun. You can see through these films how he became a better director and a better filmmaker. It's like watching someone's film school filmmaking reel. Hag in a Black Leather Jacket is first year and Eat Your Makeup is 3rd year, theoretically. A nanny who kidnaps girls and forces them to model to death in front of her pervert boyfriend, played by David Lochary, and some deranged friends of theirs. Eat Your Makeup stars Malcolm Soul, who John Waters describes as his first star, and she's in both Eat Your Makeup and Roman Candles, and she is the star of the nanny who kidnaps these girls, and it really feels like it's more based on her being a star. Malcolm Soul is interesting because Malcolm Soul died after the release date that's listed on this film for Wikipedia, at least, so she didn't get to be in any of the John Waters features. It's kind of interesting to think what an effect that probably had on the Dreamlanders and the kind of films they would make and who would be the star of that. And she's really the star in this film as the nanny who makes these girls do this. She's really dressed up, and apparently she would pick out cool thrift store clothes, and she sounded like one of their cool friends from the Baltimore scene who eventually died of a liver failure, unfortunately. But she was really John Waters' first star. A lot of people who were involved in John Waters films early on had short lifespans. David Lochary also, and Divine, of course. Mona Montgomery, I don't know what happened to, and she was only in these three, but Malcolm Soule had kind of a star presence about her. Divine is in this, and Divine is almost like trying to get attention of the camera the whole time. You can tell Divine wants to be a star. Now Divine gets in an amazing sequence where he dreams of being Jackie Kennedy, which seriously has nothing to do with the movie. It's just kind of a weird side plot. It's probably one of the things that Eat Your Makeup is most famous for, is that sequence. He dreams of being Jacqueline Kennedy, and then he dreams of being as Jacqueline Kennedy during the JFK assassination, which they reenact with Divine as Jacqueline Kennedy, which is truly bizarre and pretty funny. You can really tell Divine wants to be a star when there's the crowd of these guys like gawking at these girls doing these fashion shows. Divine's really pushing ahead to be like almost featured. Like, you can really tell Divine has more of a drive to be a character in the movie than a lot of these people I think were just in their friend's weird movie. It reminds me a lot more of a kind of a typical 60s art house movie, but it reminds me a lot of Pink Flamingos, especially girls being kept captive by these weird perverts, and especially David Lochary from his role in Pink Flamingos. It feels like the guy who directed Pink Flamingos, it feels like he's closer to that than he was with Hag in a Black Leather Jacket. And that was an interesting thing to watch the evolution to. I think I liked Eat Your Makeup the most. This one has a lot of pop songs in it, and it's funny because of that. It would be nice if they released this one. It was my favorite of the three shorts. Those are the three early John Waters shorts from the 60s. These are the three films he made during the 60s. It was a pleasure being able to review them for you. I hope if you're a John Waters fan, you have the opportunity to see these three shorts. If you ever hear of a retrospective or any of his photo shows coming to your town, I encourage you to look up if they're playing these shorts, because I don't think they'll be released. So if you have seen or would like to talk about Hag in a Black Leather Jacket, Roman Candles, or Eat Your Makeup, or would just like to talk about John Waters in general, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.